Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Shri Shri Radha Madhava Shri Satish Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I'll just share my screen. Are you able to see the slide? Is everyone able to see the slide with Krishna and Arjuna?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji. So today we're discussing Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 16, and the title of the chapter is Transcendental Knowledge. So please repeat after me. Kim karma kim akarmeti
Kim karma kim akarmeti
kavayopyatra mohitaha
kavayopyatra mohitaha
tatte karma pravakshyami
tatte karma pravakshyami
yajnatva mokshase shubhat.
yajnatva mokshase shubhat.
Kim karma kim akarmeti
Kim karma kim akarmeti
kavayopyatra mohitaha
kavayopya atra mohitaha
tatte karma pravakshyami
tatte karma pravakshyami
ज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
किं कर्म किम अकर्मेति
किं कर्म किम् अकर्मेति
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
Would you like to chant, Mataji?
Yes, please. किं कर्म किम् अकर्मेति
किं कर्म किम अकर्मेति
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
मोहिता
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
तत्ते
तत्ते
कर्म
प्रवक्ष्यामि।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
यज्ञात्
यज्ञात्वा
मोक्ष्यसे
मोक्ष्यसे
शुभात्।
शुभात्. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to chant?
किं कर्म किम् अकर्मेति
किं कर्म किम् अकर्मेति
कवयो अपि अत्र मोहिताः।
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
यज्ञ यज् ज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात्।
यज्ञात्वा
ज्ञात्वा
मोक्ष्यसे
मोक्ष्यसे
शुभात्।
शुभात्। किं कर्म
किम् अकर्मेति
किं
किं
कर्म किम्
कर्म किम्
अकर्मेति
अकर्मेति
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
कवयोऽप्यत्र
अप्यत्र
मोहिताः।
मोहिताः।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
तत्ते
तत्ते
कर्म
कर्म
प्रवक्ष्यामि।
प्रवक्ष्यामि।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे
मोक्षसे
शुभात्।
शुभात्। किं कर्म किम् अकर्मेति
किं कर्म किम् अकर्मेति
कवायो अपि अत्र मोहिता।
कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात्।
यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात्।
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to the synonyms. Kim,
किं
Kim,
what is?
what is?
Karma,
कर्म
Karma,
action.
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 Kim,
किं
Kim,
what is?
what
what
is?
Akarma,
अकर्म
Akarma,
inaction.
inaction.
Iti,
इति
Iti,
thus.
thus.
Kavayaha,
कवयः
Kavayaha,
the intelligent.
the
the intellect.
intelligent.
Api,
अपि
Api,
also.
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 Atra,
Atra,
अत्र
in this matter.
in
in
this
this matter.
matter.
Mohitaha,
मोहिताः
Mohitaha,
are bewildered.
are bewildered.
Tat,
तत्
That,
that.
that
They,
ते
they,
unto you.
unto
unto
you
you,
Karma,
karma
karma,
work.
work
work.
Prakshami,
pravakshami.
Pravakshami,
I shall explain.
I
I
shall
shall
explain.
explain.
Yat,
Yat
Yat,
which.
which
which.
Nyatva,
not
Nyatva,
knowing.
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 Mokshase,
Mokshase.
Mokshase,
you will be liberated.
You
you
will
will
be
be
liberated.
liberated.
Ashubhat,
Ashubha,
Ashubha.
from ill fortune.
from ill fortune.
Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। So before I start, I would like to seek the blessings of all the devotees so that I may be able to speak something useful. So I'll just repeat the verse one more time. Kim karma kim akarmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha tatte karma pravakshyami yajñatva mokshase shubhat. So kim karma kim akarmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha. This means that even the kavis are intelligent persons. So even the kavis are bewildered, mohita. We must have heard the word moha before used in the sense of illusion. So mohita means bewildered. So even the kavis are bewildered and they're trying to ascertain what is karma and what is akarma, when they're trying to figure out what is action and what is inaction. A secondary meaning for the word kavi is also poet. So understanding poetry can sometimes require much more intelligence than understanding prose or normal writing. And communicating through poetry, which means that you have to encode complex messages into poetic compositions, means that you require even more intelligence than the intelligence required just to understand poetry. Creating poetry is even harder than understanding poetry. So even expert poets and intelligent people are confused when it comes to figuring out what is action and what is inaction. And even Arjuna was a kavi or an intelligent person. We can see that throughout his interactions with Dronacharya during his childhood and his youth, he impressed his teacher so many times. Like in the picture we can see one time, this is a famous story, but there was a competition in Dronacharya's military school about who could shoot the eye of the bird exactly. And each student came up and Dronacharya asked them, "What do you see?" But they gave an answer that wasn't satisfactory for him. But when he asked Arjuna, "What do you see?" then he said, "I only see the eye of the bird and nothing else." So that was very demonstrative of Arjuna's focus. Even though there was so many other things around him, like the clouds and the sun and so many other students and his teacher, his goal was to hit that eye. So all he could see was the eye. He was a very intelligent person, therefore, and he was the favorite student of Dronacharya. And because of his expertise, even demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Indra gave him very special weapons, celestial weapons, and showed him how to fight with those weapons in war. So Arjuna was a very intelligent person. His intelligence was also exhibited during Draupadi's Swayamvara, where he could shoot the eye of a fish by looking at its reflection in the water. So even though Arjuna was so intelligent, he was still confused. You can see that in this picture how confused he is. He has his hand on his head and he's not sure what to do, because he thinks that inaction, according to his understanding, inaction would be better than action, but Krishna is telling him to do action. At the beginning of the 3rd chapter, Arjuna says, Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. The translation is, if intelligence is better than fruitive work, buddhi karmanaha jayasi chet. So jayasi means better, buddhi is intelligence. So if intelligence is better than fruitive work, karmanaha means fruitive work. So if intelligence is better than fruitive work, why are you engaging me in this horrible activity of the war? Kim karmani gore mam niyojayasi. So Arjuna is asking that buddhi, he equates buddhi or intelligence to the path of jnana yoga and considers that to be an action. So he's saying, if you're saying intelligence is better, then why should I do this horrible war? Why are you engaging me in this horrible activity of the war? So here Arjuna has a different understanding of inaction than what Krishna will eventually propound. So in other words, he misunderstands what a karma or inaction means. At the beginning of the 6th chapter, 2 chapters from this chapter, Krishna says, Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. So he says that one who is unattached to the fruits of his work, one who works but is unattached to the fruits of his work, he's actually in the renounced order of life. He's the true, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So this is the true renunciation that Krishna is advocating for. So Krishna shows that real inaction or real renunciation it means that you're always active in Krishna consciousness. You're not acting for material ends, but you're acting for Krishna consciousness, and that's real inaction. Because the pure devotee is always active for Krishna, he's not attached to or bound by the results of his work, and is therefore truly inactive in the material sense. Because he's only active in the spiritual sense, then he's not working towards material ends like other people. And on the other hand, some people say that they're renunciates, that they're not acting, that they're doing inaction, but they're not truly inactive. We can see that in the 5th verse of the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, Nahi kashchit kshanamapi jatu tishtatya karmakrit. So no one can refrain from doing something even for a moment. That's what that verse means. And the classic examples for this are Vishwamitra and Saubhari Muni. So Vishwamitra was a king before he started doing austerities to become a Brahmana or a sage. And that's a long story which involves Vashishta Muni also. But the point is that Vishwamitra was doing austerities for 64,000 years. But then he fell down. One may wonder, how come he fell down after so long? Nowadays, we don't even live for 64,000 years. We can't even live for 100 years. But Vishwamitra was practicing meditation and austerity, and he was on the path of renunciation for 64,000 years. But then he fell down. Does anyone know what the cause of his fall down was?
अभी एकदम हाथ पकड़ के चलो, मैं किसी को नहीं बताऊंगा.
Can I say?
Go ahead, Mataji.
Okay. Because he was not doing the devotional service. he was just meditating on. So basically, when you are not able, you might fall down.
Yes, Mataji. I think the ultimate cause would be that. But I was just looking for like kind of the immediate cause for his fall down. Indra basically sent an apsara called Menaka to entice Vishwamitra because Indra is always insecure about who's going to take his position. So whenever someone starts becoming very powerful through their austerity, he tries to break their austerity or break their penance somehow. So he sent this heavenly damsel called Menaka. So she went near the place where Vishwamitra was meditating for 64,000 years, and she started dancing. And she had anklets on her ankles. And because of the sound of those anklets, he did not even see her, but just because of the sound of those anklets, he opened his eyes and then he broke his meditation and he became attracted to her. So what does this tell us? This tells us that though he tried to withdraw his senses for meditation, his senses were still active. His ears were still active because he could hear what she was doing with her anklets. So though outwardly it looked like he was inactive, he was actually not inactive. His senses were still active. So the Apsara could cause him to break his meditation in order to unite with him. So even though he tried to be inactive and he showed himself as an inactive person, at the end of the day, he couldn't do it. Similarly, there was another person called Saupari Muni, and he's connected to the Kaliya pastime. He also tried to withdraw his senses, and he went underwater and he was meditating there for thousands of years. But then, because of his eyes, he saw two fish mating underwater. And because he saw that, he wanted to do the same thing, so his senses got agitated. So through his eyes being active, the rest of his senses got agitated and he broke his meditation. So people who renounce like this don't end up being successful most of the times, unless in a very few cases these kinds of penances were successful. But usually people's senses get agitated and they can't be inactive anymore. So we can see how those who are materially trying to be inactive, it doesn't work. But the pure devotee is actually inactive in the material sense because he is not at all attached to the fruits of his work, and he offers all of the fruits of his work to Krishna. So he doesn't work towards any material ends, and consequently he doesn't experience any emotions that someone who's working towards material ends may experience. Like he doesn't experience any frustration or hankering because he's not attached to the results of his work. So action in Krishna consciousness is like the true inaction, or the true vairagya, renunciation, or the true sannyas. So now we'll move to Srila Prabhupada's purport because he explains how we should act in Krishna consciousness through his purport. Purport. Action in Krishna consciousness has to be executed in accord with the examples of previous bona fide devotees. This is recommended in the 15th verse. Why such action should not be independent will be explained in the text to follow. To act in Krishna consciousness, one has to follow the leadership of authorized persons who are in a line of disciplic succession, as explained in the beginning of this chapter. The system of Krishna consciousness was first narrated to the sun god, and the sun god explained it to his son Manu. Manu explained it to his son Ikshvaku, and the system is current on this earth from that very remote time. So here Prabhupada is summarizing the previous verses of the 4th chapter. It started with Evam Parampara Praptam, the verses that follow that explaining the disciplic succession starting from Krishna. Therefore, one has to follow in the footsteps of previous authorities, in the line of disciplic succession. Otherwise, even the most intelligent men will be bewildered regarding the standard actions of Krishna consciousness. For this reason, the Lord decided to instruct Arjuna in Krishna consciousness directly. Because of the direct instruction of the Lord to Arjuna, anyone who follows in the footsteps of Arjuna is certainly not bewildered. So as soon as we get a guru, as soon as we get connected with the line of succession, then most of our illusion is dispelled, it's destroyed. Like we often say, Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. So the spiritual master with the torchlight of knowledge, he removes the darkness of ignorance. If someone's unmuted, could you kindly please mute? I think I'm hearing some noise. So yeah, I was talking about Om Ajnana Timirandhasya. Whenever we meet the spiritual master and we take shelter of the spiritual master, a lot of our confusion and bewilderment goes away. So that's what Prabhupada is explaining in Arjuna's case, that when Arjuna took instruction from Krishna, his bewilderment was vanquished. And in the same way, anyone who follows in the footsteps of Arjuna will also not be bewildered. It is said that one cannot ascertain the ways of religion simply by imperfect experimental knowledge. Actually, the principles of religion can only be laid down by the Lord himself. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. One can manufacture a religious principle by imperfect speculation. No one can manufacture a religious principle by imperfect speculation. One must follow in the footsteps of great authorities like Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Manu, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlada, Bhishma, Shukadev Goswami, Yamaraja, Janaka, and Bali Maharaj. So here Prabhupada is saying that we can't manufacture ways of religion simply by imperfect experimental knowledge. So to begin with, our senses are imperfect. So it's difficult that just through experiments we can come to a perfect conclusion, because no matter what we do, our senses will always be imperfect. That's one of the 4 defects in this material world. So we should trust Shastra, we should trust Shabda Pramana instead of just Pratyaksha and Anumana. Pratyaksha means that which we see directly, Anumana is that which we derive by inference, and Shabda Pramana is usually the scriptures, or what the learned authorities or acharyas tell us. So since our senses are imperfect to begin with, it's better to trust the Shastra. The Shastra is called Apaurushaya. It means it doesn't pertain to man, it doesn't pertain to human. It's superhuman. So therefore it can't be imperfect. So it's better if we trust in Shastra, and in Shastra we find the principles that the Lord has given us. So therefore we can follow an authorized religion if we follow Shastra. But if we try to make our own religions, then we won't go too far. Nowadays people make interesting religions. In school, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I heard of something called Pastafarianism, and people wear those, I think it's called a colander, where you wash the pasta once you boil it, and they wear it as a hat, and they say that it's their religion, and they made a scripture out of it. So it's quite interesting, but it's not bona fide, so I don't know how much benefit they would get from it. So we shouldn't waste our time participating in religions like that. It's better to follow the codes that the Lord has laid down himself. And in the later part of this paragraph, Prabhupada lists all the Mahajanas. And these Mahajanas are listed in the Srimad Bhagavatam by Yamaraj. When the Yamadutas are utterly shocked that there's some authority greater than Yamaraj, whose servants stopped them when they were trying to take Ajamila to hell. The Vishnudutas said that, no, you can't take him to hell. We are the servants of Vishnu. Vishnu is greater than Yamaraj, and we have decided that he can be saved because he chanted the name of Narayana on his deathbed. So the Yamadutas were very shocked. Before that time, they didn't know that there was anyone greater than Yamaraj. So Yamaraj, they go to Yamaraj and they ask, and he says that this is actually a verse that Yamaraj says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranita. So he explains to them how Lord Vishnu is greater than himself, and how he's one of the Mahajanas, one of the main devotees, the great personalities who exemplify devotional service to the Lord. So this is the list of the 12 Mahajanas: Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Manu, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlada, Bhishma, Shukadev Goswami, Yamaraj, Janaka, and Bali Maharaj. By citing these authorities, Prabhupada sheds light on how we can take scripture and apply it in our real lives. Sometimes the stories in scripture may seem very distant to us. They may seem like, oh, they're from a different yuga, and it's so hard to follow and kind of replicate those lives, replicate those qualities that we find in scripture in our own lives, because we're in Kali Yuga, so it's so hard. It may seem like that, but by telling us that we should follow in the footsteps of these previous acharyas, Prabhupada implicitly implies that we can follow in their footsteps, we can imbibe what they're teaching us, and we can emulate them. Sometimes I've heard Gopal Krishna Maharaj say that in the material world, people conceive of movie stars or sports champions or models as their heroes, but our heroes are the Mahajanas. Maha means great and Jana means personality. So for the devotees, our heroes are the Mahajanas. And what do we do with our heroes generally? We admire them and we emulate them. In other words, we try to be like them. In materialistic society, this may mean that we try to dress like them, or we put pictures of them in our houses, or we wear clothes that have pictures of them on them, like shirts, or if we name our kids after those movie stars. For example, 6 years ago, there was a movie called Bahubali released. I've never watched it, but I just heard of the name. And I was seeing ladies wearing saris with the characters of this movie on the sari. So they were so obsessed with that movie that they started wearing saris with the characters of that movie on the sari. So that seemed a little absurd to me, but it shows the extent of their admiration of those movie actors. But how we can emulate the Mahajanas can be in a much deeper way. We may name our kids after them. That's a really nice thing to do, of course, as we saw in Ajamila's story. We may have pictures of them in our house. That's also good. But most importantly, we have to try to live just like how they lived. We have to try to serve Krishna with the same mood of service and surrender that they had. That should be our primary goal. So the glorious life histories of all of these Mahajanas are encapsulated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, also known as the Bhagavata Purana. So they're perfectly applicable to the day-to-day struggles that we face. They're not distant from our lives. I've heard my Guru Maharaj Hanumat Preshaka Swami say that Prabhupada once said that every psychological situation one can encounter is addressed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's just like a life manual. We can look for characters that match our situation at a particular time and try to gain inspiration from them. For example, I personally drew a lot of strength from Dhruva Maharaj's story when in my childhood days and even now. Dhruva Maharaj experienced situations that felt very unfair at an early age. And he didn't feel like he was at the level to forgive those who harmed him or treated him unjustly. So we may also experience situations that are unfair. And we may also feel certain material desires come up in us, like, now I'll show that person how capable and how resilient I am. Even though he harmed me, now I'm going to show him. But we may feel like that, but Dhruva Maharaja's story teaches us that even if we have such desires, we should go to Krishna and worship him. And eventually Krishna will purify us of those desires. Just worshiping Krishna will eventually take us to a higher platform, even if we're not ready to forgive or advance immediately. If we pray to Krishna that please help me forgive, please help me transform my consciousness to be more forgiving, more compassionate, and more humble, then Krishna will surely help us, just like how he helped Dhruva Maharaj. And at the end of his life, Dhruva Maharaj could go back to Godhead. Similarly, there maybe mothers could draw inspiration from the stories of Suniti or Uttara or Kunti. So there are so many ways that you can relate your life to the Srimad Bhagavatam and then gain light and guidance from it. So now let's see what specific lessons for practical spirituality, we may say, that the Mahajanas that Prabhupada listed in the purport can give us. So the first Mahajana is Brahma. Brahma is also known as Swayambhu, the self-born one. So we can discuss Brahma's story. He first was born out of a lotus that sprung from the navel of Vishnu. And when he first came out, everything was pitch dark around him. And he was in an utter state of shock and confusion because he did not know what to do. He was clueless on what to do with his life. And he tried to find the source of his existence by going down the stem of that lotus. And as a part of that effort, he couldn't find his origin. So then he came back to the surface of the lotus flower. And then he heard 2 syllables. Does anyone know what those 2 syllables were?
Tapa.
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 Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, so there were tapa, and tapa means penance. When you put those 2 together, it means penance. So he didn't even know where that sound was coming from, but he trusted that this is what I should do now. So he performed penance for several years of the demigods, which is like the years of the demigods are calculated to be much longer than human years. So he performed penance for a very, very long time. And then after he performed the penance, the trajectory of his life was completely illuminated for him because Krishna appeared and entrusted him with the task of creating the universe. So Krishna came and he gave him his service. Brahma didn't know what service to do and he was confused. But when he followed the instruction that Krishna gave him, it was Krishna who said those 2 syllables, but Brahma didn't know it at the time. Then his service became clear. And Krishna even awarded him a vision of the Vaikuntha planet. So it was a very beautiful vision, and Brahma could see all the residents of Vaikuntha glorifying Vishnu and Lakshmi, and he could see the beautiful planets, and he could see other residents flying in the sky with their celestial airplanes. So he could see the spiritual world after he performed this penance. But just like Brahma, many times in our life, we may have absolutely no clue on what we're supposed to do next. Even though we may not be in darkness in a literal sense, we may feel very dark and low internally, and we may not know, we may really be looking for guidance. And at those times, we should trust in Shabda Pramana, or take shelter of Shabda Pramana, or the instructions that come through us through sound. In the Vedic system, Shabda Pramana is considered to be the Vedas or any Shastra, like I explained before, because previously the Shastras were transmitted orally and people didn't read them. So therefore, Shastras are also considered Shabda Pramana. and then any words that great acharyas speak. So for us, in our context, taking shelter of Shabda Pramana, like Brahma did, would mean most specifically looking for guidance and light in Srila Prabhupada's books and lectures. So I've heard many stories of devotees who experienced very difficult times and they didn't know what to do next, but they would randomly open Prabhupada's books on a random page and they would just read. And then they would receive the most appropriate words for their situation. They would just receive guidance on what to do next. Like once they heard what Prabhupada had to tell them, then it was clear what they had to do. So they came out of the confusion. Just like how once Arjuna heard Krishna's words, he said that he doesn't have any confusion anymore. He said, Nashta moha smritir labda tvat prasadat maya chuta. So because of your mercy, I don't have any illusion or moha anymore. So similarly, if we follow Brahma's footsteps and we take shelter of Shabda Pramana when we're confused, which would also mean consulting with senior devotees and taking their advice, then most of the time our confusion will be completely dispelled. So I was wondering if anyone has any personal stories to share if they read Prabhupada's books and they received guidance when they were very confused. I have one, but I wanted to hear if anyone else.
Yeah, I have one.
Please go ahead, Prabhu.
This is Piari. I was out on book distribution many years ago, and I was by myself and trying to distribute books, and nobody was taking them, and I was doing really bad, and I was getting so angry at these people, and I even thought about it. I wonder how it would be being a Yamaduta and ripping them out of their bodies. And then I thought maybe I should sit down and read something. And I sat down, I opened it up just like you said, any page, and the first thing I read was, a Brahmin is always peaceful. So then, this is the truth. Then I changed my objective from selling books to trying to sell the books, but my goal was to remain peaceful. Right after I read that, I wasn't trying to, I didn't care if they took a book or not take a book, I had to remain peaceful. And then I did that, and I just started just trying to be peaceful. And after a while, at first they weren't taking books, but I didn't let it disturb me at all. I just kept trying and stayed peaceful. And then after a while, they started taking books. So, but my goal is just to be peaceful. But that was a really good thing for me to open up to when I'm ready to kill these people. And a Brahmin is always peaceful. And I was far from it. So that was one really nice thing that I remember. I'm sure there were many times, but that was one. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you. That was very nice. And I think that we can follow your example and be peaceful, because you showed us that it works to be peaceful and patient. Thank you.
You definitely seem peaceful. I think you may need a little anger. No, you're really good.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to share?
I mean, it has happened to me many, many, many times. It's not just once or twice, but I don't remember exactly what I read. But I remember the first time it happened to me. This was in my early 20s. You want to hear that?
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah, so I was not quite offering everything I cooked because I was not cooking everything that's offerable either. And, my family was always like waiting to eat. They never gave me any time to offer. This was like, in my early 20s. And I thought to myself, like, I never have time to offer. It's like everybody's like just waiting to eat as soon as I cook. And then after the meal, I just happened to read Back to Godhead. This was in a Back to Godhead. And I was reading, the first thing I read was Srila Prabhupada's lecture that was given. And in that lecture, Srila Prabhupada says, how much time does it take to offer? All you have to say is Namo Brahmani Devaya Go Brahmanita, and the whole mantra was there 3 times. So for the longest time, I didn't offer I wasn't saying the entire prayer for offering. I was just offering with just saying Namo Brahmani Devaya Go Brahmanita Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Nama 3 times. That's all I said. But that's what Srila Prabhupada said in that lecture. How much time does it take for you to offer? All you have to say is that mantra 3 times. So I felt like, oh my God. Here I was thinking I don't have time to offer, and Srila Prabhupada just said that. Like I had to hear that, It's pretty amazing. And then after that, I started doing that. I started offering, whatever was offerable. Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji. I'm reminded of what Prabhupada said, I'll never die, I'll always live in my books.
Mm-hmm. And then it has happened to me so many times. It's like, I can't even count. Every time I have some problem, I open the Bhagavad Gita or any one of Srila Prabhupada's books, and there's something there that you needed to hear,
Yeah, it happened. It didn't happen to me so many times, probably because I'm not as advanced as all of you. It happened to me one time last semester. I was really stressed out about a paper I had to write because I couldn't figure out what the topic would be. So then I was listening to a lecture by Prabhupada, and he was talking about how Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, at the end of every chapter in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he begs for the mercy of the Goswamis before he commences another chapter. So Prabhupada was saying that you can't write on your own strength. You have to beg the Goswamis for the strength. So then I realized that I was trying to write on my own strength, which I don't have very much. So I need to pray to the Goswamis every time I have to write something. That's one experience I had. So this is one lesson that we can learn from Brahma's life, and there are many other lessons we could learn from his Brahma Samhita prayers as well. But in the interest of time, I'll just move ahead. The next Mahajana is Narada Muni. Narada Muni is actually the son of Brahma, but before that he was on the material planet. He was the son of a maidservant, and his life, for me, one of the lessons that his life really exemplified was the verse that we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Koi, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. So the verdict of all revealed scriptures is that even by a moment of association with a pure devotee, one can attain all success. So his example, Narada Muni's example, teaches us that we should always yearn for and take advantage of elevated devotees' association. And by doing so, we'll receive immense strength to overcome any obstacles that may come our way and remain focused on our singular goal of attaining Krishna. So Narada Muni was fatherless from a very early stage of his life, and only when he was 5 years old, one time, a group of saints called the Bhaktivedantas visited his home, and they stayed for 4 months because it was the Chaturmasya period. So he engaged in personally serving them with his mother, and he used to hear from them very submissively. Even though he was so young, he wasn't interested in playing too much, but he would just hear from those sages. And Narada Muni said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, quote, by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. And then what he actually listened from them was that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So this is exactly what Krishna is telling Arjuna as well, that we should dedicate all our activities to Krishna which means dedicating the fruits of those activities to Krishna. And then that's as good as an action because we're not bound by the results of those works. So not only did Narada Muni hear from those sages, one time with their permission, he also took their Mahaprasad. He honored the remnants of what they ate. And by doing this, Narada Muni said that his sins were immediately eradicated. So ultimately, through the Bhaktivedanta's mercy, Narada Muni was well equipped to weather a whole range of physical and emotional difficulties in the course of his devotional service, and he ultimately became a pure devotee of the Lord. Shortly after the Bhaktivedantas left, his mother, Narada's mother, passed away because a snake bit her on the leg when she was milking a cow. And Narada Muni explains that he took this as the mercy of the Lord. He was so young, but he could understand that this is the mercy of the Lord. And how could he understand that? Because he got the mercy of the Lord's devotees. So even though he was so young and he went through such a shocking event of his mother passing away, he had a very mature perspective on it. So after he understood that this is the mercy of the Lord, he headed in the northern direction. And he passed through many beautiful forests, towns, and villages, but he also passed through many dangerous places alone. He said, I then passed alone through many forests of rushes, bamboo reeds, sharp grass, weeds, and caves, which were very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark, and dangerously fearful forests, which were the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals. So if we imagine that he's probably just a little older than 5 years old and he's walking through all of these dangerous places alone, it's a pretty difficult thing to do. But he was fixed on his goal. He wants to go to the forest and meditate on Krishna. So he overcame all of these obstacles. He could have just stayed in his village where his mom was and not have worried about all these fearful things. But he wanted to accomplish his goal, which was to achieve Krishna. So he didn't care about all these obstacles and he could overcome them. And if you look at it carefully, even the beautiful forests and the towns are also obstacles in his devotional service because they could entice him to get attracted to those, like to stay at one of those beautiful forests or one of those beautiful towns and enjoy all the facilities that are there. But he didn't get distracted either by promises for great happiness or by situations of great distress, because he had a lot of focus on his one goal. So he says, after that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the supersoul situated within, using my intelligence as I had learned from the liberated souls. As soon as I began to meditate upon the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, my mind transformed in transcendental love. Tears rolled down my eyes, and without delay, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of my heart. So he accomplished his goal, though Krishna does disappear after that, and Krishna says, you need to practice devotional service for longer before you can see me. But this was really a big milestone in Narada Muni's devotional service. And he could only accomplish this through the intelligence given to him by those Bhaktivedantas, as he said in this translation. So we can see just how important it is to associate with elevated devotees, because they'll give us the strength to overcome any obstacles in our devotional service. Even in one of the songs to the Vaishnava Acharyas, I think it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur who says, Ekaki amara nahi paya bala harinama sankirtane. Alone I have no strength. We can only gain strength when we associate with pure devotees, with advanced devotees. And they'll give us mercy either through their prasadam or through their instructions of transcendental knowledge. They'll give us mercy, and we should try to serve them as much as possible. We can try to cook for them, we can try
I don't know if anybody can hear, but it's frozen for me. Is it frozen for the others?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Any questions?
You have all the answers, Pierre?
Oh, she's coming back.
7:56.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, sorry, I don't know what happened to my mic, but now it's saying your microphone is not working. Please check your connection or use a different mic. So I'll just try to use.
We can
We
hear
can hear
you.
you.
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
I logged in through my phone.
Oh, I see.
That's fine. We don't have to see you. We can hear you. Hearing is more important than seeing.
Okay. I'm sorry about that, but I guess I can't share my screen anymore either.
That's fine. Then we don't get deviated by other things.
There's 3 minutes left, so I'll just finish what I had to say about Radha. I was just saying that we should try to serve devotees, and they would give us the strength to eventually go back to Godhead and attain Krishna. Even Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in one of his bhajans, Ekaki amara nahi paya bala harinama sankirtane, that alone I have no strength, and only through the mercy of the Vaishnava can I get strength to chant the holy name of the Lord. So that's the lesson that stood out most to me in Narada Muni's life. I also had information about Lord Shiva, but since we only have 2 minutes, I'll stop here and see if anyone has any comments or corrections or questions. Pyari Prabhu and Jiva Mataji, would you like to?
Well, I remember Srila Prabhupada, not very often, but he'd give class and then go into complete ecstasy and lose external consciousness. And I was wondering if that's what just happened.
I don't think so.
She was frozen like that, right? In transcendence.
Okay, that's my only question.
But I had a comment from the purport that you were reading. It says that one should take instructions from authorities in disciplic succession. So that kind of really, denounces the Ritvik method. I was thinking it was so clear in that purport.
Yes, Mataji. Or they could say that the disciplic succession ends at Srila Prabhupada.
I know, right? It's so clear. Srila Prabhupada's purport was so clear. You were reading it, and I was thinking that it's just clearly states, how we should take instruction.
Yes. Very good point, Mataji. Anyone else? Okay, if no one has any comments, I would like to offer my respect to everyone. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Santakoti Vishwanda Ki Jai.
Very nice class. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Sugopi Mataji ki jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna.